How's it going, my friends? Welcome back. So a few days ago, I made a post asking you guys to send me some questions. It could either be design related or about building a business or anything really. And I had some really great responses from that. You guys asked some really good questions. And so today, I'm gonna be answering those. So let's take a look at them. GG914 asks, could you upload more videos? They're really valuable. First off, I'm really happy to know that you guys find these videos valuable. I have so many positive comments all the time about how much these videos help you all and how much you're learning, and that's really great to see. You know, I look at a lot of other YouTube channels and comments can have, quite a few negative things in them, but I just don't really ever see that here. And if there ever is any criticism, it's always given so politely and with respect, and I just really appreciate that. I love making videos for you guys, and I'm definitely going to be releasing more very soon. To be honest, my schedule has just been extremely busy over the past couple weeks, but after things cool off a bit, I'll definitely be putting out more videos and hopefully on a more regular basis. Arg asks, how often do you watch graphic design tutorials? Thanks, Brandon. Oh, you're welcome. So to be honest, I don't really watch tutorials that much anymore. If I need to know how to do a very specific thing in a specific program, I'll definitely look that up just to save time. But really, I think these days, the thing that helps me out more than anything is just looking at other people's work. I like to take inspiration from other fields, not just graphic design, and I highly recommend everybody to do that. Also, I'd say the thing that I found about most graphic design tutorials is that they teach you how to do a very specific thing in a very specific situation. So unless you're working on a project that requires that exact technique in that exact situation, you can kind of just be left not knowing what to do. And that's why I think it's so important to understand the basics of design. You want to understand why people make decisions and not just how they make them. And that way, when you're presented with a problem that you've never seen before, you can break it down and work through it without needing somebody to show you step by step how to do it. That's the type of info I'm trying to give you guys on this channel, and I hope I'm doing a good job at that, and I'm always happy to hear how I can do it better. Now we have a question from Daniel. Why are you making a YouTube channel? Is it to find new clients, help the community, or what? So I made this channel for several reasons. First, I just kind of like teaching. I like helping people. I know what it's like to start out with nothing and no knowledge in graphic design and trying to figure this whole thing out. It's not easy. The thing is though, that the internet has a ton of information for you to learn from. But when you're first starting out, it's hard to sift through it all. You don't know what's right, what's wrong, what might be a little bit of both. You don't know what you don't know. And it can be hard to figure out what path you should take to get from knowing nothing to a level of where, maybe I could actually sell my graphic design services. And so with this channel, I'm trying to fill in some of that information for people that are in the situation right now that I was in when I first started out. And to be fair, in full transparency, the other reason I made this channel is because I want another stream of income. If nothing else, this whole corona pandemic situation should have shown us all how important it is to have more than one stream of income. I've heard about a lot of designers who have just basically lost all or at least most of their work throughout this time, and that can really put a strain on your life if you don't have some other area that can pick up the slack during those times. And so my hope is that you guys will get enough value from this channel that when I do release something paid, like a course or a product, you might consider buying that and helping to support it. Because in the end, the more successful I can make this channel, the more time I can spend making content for you guys. Amplifier97. I'm interested in your design career in general and how you started out and got to where you are now. Also, how do you work with clients efficiently? So I actually get this question quite often. People want to know, did I go to school for design or am I self-taught? How did I get clients? And so what I think I've decided to do is make a completely separate video about all of that stuff. I'll go through my entire graphic design journey, how I learned what I did, what it's like to build a business from nothing, the ups and downs that can come with that, and I may even show you guys some of my earlier work along the way, which should be pretty interesting. So if you'd like to see something like that, leave me a comment and let me know. For now though, I will answer the second part of your question, how do you work with clients efficiently? So in my opinion, usually the thing that takes the most time and that can honestly just zap all of the energy out of projects are revisions. It's like you've put so much work into this project, you show it to the client, and then they're like, I want to change this, this, and this. You make those changes, you send it back, they've got 4 more changes they want to make, and it just goes on and on and on. And those things can just kill your time and your budget and make the project something that you just don't enjoy working on anymore. And that's not good for you or the client. You want to give them your best, you want to like what you're working on. And so how do you mitigate revisions? Well, the first thing is to accept that there's always going to be revisions no matter how hard you try. What you want to do though is to minimize the amount of work that you actually have to revise. For example, it's better to have to make 10 revisions that take you 5 minutes apiece than it is to have to redesign the entire concept from scratch. Which is why in all of my projects, I make sure to have a process. Because designing a project for a client is a lot like going to the gym. You can go to the gym, but if every time you go, you're using different weights, you're constantly changing your routine, and you're never consistent about anything, you can put in a lot of work, it'll feel really hard, but you just don't get anywhere. You don't get the results you're after. You could be wasting a lot of time doing things you don't really need to do, or you could be spending not enough time in areas that would really benefit you later on. The thing is, you have to have a process, and you really need a process for each type of project that you do. Creating a flyer will have a completely different process from creating a website, and you need to understand each of those processes in and out, not only so you can follow them, but also so you can explain that process to your client so they're just not left in the dark wondering what in the world's going on now. And what I would highly recommend everybody doing is that once you figure out your process, determine the points in that process that you need client interaction. If the only 2 times you ever talk with your client are when they give you the brief and when you send them the final project, you're going to have a really hard time and you're likely going to be redoing a lot of work. So instead, what I would recommend is that at each major stage of the project, check in with your client. Now, say you're working on a project and you've done your concept sketches. Show those to the client. See what they think about them. Make sure you guys are on the same page before you move on to the next stage. And also, each stage, have them sign off that they approve this stage. That way, if you get 3, 4, 5 stages down the road and they end up wanting to change something back in stage 1 that would affect everything you've done since then, you can have a reasonable discussion with them that that's going to cost extra. Because at this stage, the reason these edits are being made is because their vision has changed. It's not that you didn't do your job well enough to understand their original vision. You did. And so changing that is going to require extra money, and most clients are perfectly happy to pay that. Our next question is, how did you start building your client base? Do you ever refuse any clients? So once again, I'll talk about how I built my client base up in my graphic design journey video that I talked about earlier. And if you want to see that, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss it when it comes out. But as far as if I ever refuse any clients, absolutely, of course I do. I would say though that I don't refuse clients, I just refuse projects. And honestly, I'd say probably about 90% of the project offers I get, I turn down. Now, a lot of times that can be for different reasons, but the vast majority of the time it's because their budgets just aren't high enough. At least the way I run my business is that I have a minimum threshold, and if a project's budget isn't above that threshold, I just don't accept it. And that's largely because I value my time pretty highly, but also it's because if I take on a project with a smaller budget, I'm having to turn down one with a higher budget. And of course, not everything is about money, but I'm running this design business as a business, and a business's main goal is generally to make money. I've got other areas that I have fun with design or use my creativity in ways that I see fit, but as far as the business, my goal is to make a living for myself. And so accepting projects with the highest budgets is a good way to do that. But here's the thing, I wasn't always in this situation. I'm very fortunate to be able to pick and choose which projects I want to do and which ones I don't. There's a lot of people that will give you the advice that you need to set a rate that you think you're worth, and if people won't pay that rate, then you just need to turn them down and move on and wait for somebody that will. And that's great advice if you have tons of people lined up at your door wanting to work with you. It's okay if you have to turn down 5 of them because you've got 5 more right behind them that want to work with you at your desired rate. And it's even perfectly fine in a situation to where you have several months of your income saved up and you don't have to take on a project right now. You can spend some time waiting for the right one to come along. However, if you're just starting out or your bank account is so low it would make the dollar menu cry, you don't need to be turning down anything. You need to take what you can get, gain some experience, and work your way up. Now, a lot of people probably don't want to hear that, but that's just the truth of the situation. Be careful when you get advice from people that have already made it in an industry, because a lot of that advice only applies once you've hit a certain threshold. People that are just starting out have to kind of play by a bit of a different game sometimes. But the great thing about design, especially if you own your own business, is you can make those jumps in career extraordinarily quickly. Because it doesn't have to take that long to get a little bit of experience under your belt, get more comfortable working with clients, and starting to raise your prices so you can make a better living for yourself. And before you know it, you'll be in a position where you can pick and choose which projects you want to do as well. Julian asks, how long did it take you to be able to visualize your concepts inside your head and then transform those thoughts into a digital design? I'm struggling to get these ideas into my head and feel what's missing or what could be interesting. It's usually this and now what moment, where I'm stagnating and not evolving the design with it being stuck in mediocrity forever. Well, Julian, the truth is that sometimes an idea will just pop into my head. I'll get a brief for a project and I'll just instantly know what I should do for that brief. Now that doesn't happen all the time. And even when it does, you have to be careful about the first idea that comes into your mind, because usually that's the first idea that everybody's going to think of. And more often than not, it's probably something pretty generic, so don't be afraid to try new things even if you think you have the perfect thing already. Now, when an idea doesn't just magically present itself, I like to do one of two things. If it's a design that has a lot of information, I'll go ahead and lay out the text on a page and try to get it into a format that has good hierarchy and an interesting layout. Once I have that and I can make sure that all the information is clear and it's easy to read and understand, then I'll go back and figure out how can I visually make this interesting. Because you want to have a good structure first before you put on all the fancy stuff. It's kind of like baking a cake. You want to know what shape the cake's going to be in, and then you can put on the icing. Now, other times, if it's a design that doesn't have a lot of textual information and it's going to be highly visual, instead of focusing on the entire design, I'll just try to pick a single element that I know I can come up with a cool concept for. I'll start fleshing out that element, see how it goes, and then build the design around that. Now, to be fair, that usually only works well if the original element you're focusing on is one of the larger elements in the design. If you're focusing on some little small thing over here that doesn't have a lot of significance, building a full concept from that piece is probably not the best idea. But the thing that took me quite a long time to realize, way longer than it should have, is that I found myself sitting at my desk trying to come up with a concept, and instead of thinking about the design, I would find myself thinking about thinking. I wasn't actually getting anything done. It's almost as if sitting there, I was fooling myself into thinking I was making progress, which I clearly wasn't. So what I would recommend, instead of just sitting there and trying to think of things, is actually start making something. Put something down on the screen. Make 7 different versions of it. Push each of those versions in wildly different directions and see where you end up. You know, don't be afraid to try things that you think are stupid, because a lot of times those will end up being your most brilliant ideas. Or at the very least, they'll give you some jumping off points to get to other ideas that you might have never thought of otherwise. And it's important to remember that a lot of times making a design is kind of like carving a statue. Sometimes you have to remove everything that's not supposed to be there before you find out what is supposed to be there. Because a lot of times trying different things that you know won't work will help you better understand why those things don't work. And that can just lead you down a better path towards concepts that are more suited for your particular project. And now a question from Enzo. How do you transition from small clients or projects to big clients or projects? So I think it's important to start off by understanding what you mean by small and big. A lot of designers, myself included when I first started out, had high hopes of wanting to work with, the biggest companies, household names, brands that people recognize. And that's a great dream because, usually those companies can be fun to work with. They almost always have bigger budgets, especially in comparison to smaller businesses. But the biggest thing, especially at larger companies, is that you're not just trying to please one person. Normally you will have contact with just a single person and they'll kind of be your go-between. You'll send them designs and they'll send that up the chain to maybe 5, 6, 7 different people, and all of those people will have a different opinion on changes you should make or the direction the design should go in, and then you get all this feedback at once and you're kind of left sitting there figuring out what to do with it all. And that can be a real challenge, because if you have 5 different people you're showing this design to, they're all going to have 5 different opinions because they all have 5 different worldviews. People see the world differently. They view your design differently. They view the company goals differently. And it can be hard sometimes to make something that pleases everybody. But in the end, that's your job. And 2, a lot of bigger companies have pretty strict brand guidelines. You don't just get to go in there and jump into a project and do whatever you want. There's specific criteria you have to meet. You can only do stuff in this particular style. You don't necessarily have the creative freedom that you'd like to have. Now, on the other hand, when you work with smaller clients, you definitely have a lot more creative freedom generally. Usually they're a little bit more laid back. The briefs are sometimes simpler, but the budgets can be certainly a lot less than some of the bigger guys can afford. Now, obviously there's companies of every size and shape that are great to work with, and there's ones that are not so great to work with. So I really wouldn't worry too much about the size of the client, and I also wouldn't worry too much about the size of the project. You may think right now that you really want to work on those projects that's going to take months to do, and it's going to have a ginormous budget, and it's just going to be all sunshine and butterflies. Most of the time, it's not. Usually large projects are very stressful. They have a lot of different people involved in them. You don't always have the level of input that you think you should, so don't be afraid to take a step back and enjoy the small projects. To be honest, my favorite types of projects are the small ones. Things that I can get done in like a day or 2, that have a decent budget, and I can move on to the next one. I think it's important to understand all that because you need to know what you're aiming for. I don't think you really care so much about going from small clients and projects to bigger clients and projects as much as you do about making a little money as a graphic designer to making a lot of money as a graphic designer. What you really want to do is learn how to charge more for your services. And there's a few ways that you can do that. First off, you have to understand that you're probably not going to land a new client by walking up to their business, telling them that their branding is terrible and that you can make something that looks great. Firstly, that's kind of insulting. And secondly, businesses usually won't spend money just to look better. I mean, just walk down your street, take a look at the businesses around you, and see how many of them could be improved with just a fresh coat of paint and maybe a little bit of a cleanup here or there. Probably all of them. Yet they don't do that. Why? Because most business owners don't see pure aesthetics as something that's going to give them a great return on their investment. However, almost every business will pay money to fix problems. So instead of walking into a business and saying, hey, I can clean up the outside of your building and I promise you it'll look so much better, it'll look so much more modern, it's going to be great, trust me. Instead, you walk right in there and you say, hey, I've noticed these 3 problems with the front of your building. From my experience, those things tend to turn customers away. So if we spend this amount of money to fix those problems, then I think you can expect this many new customers. I think you can expect increased revenue because your current customers are going to feel more comfortable in your business. And I think we could steal some people away from your current competition. This all just boils down to the fact that you're not really selling design. Your client is not purchasing a flyer from you. They're purchasing the customers that are going to be brought in from your flyer. Your client is not buying a website. They're purchasing all the sales they're going to make through the website that you built. And when you understand this, you can start to price yourself based on the value that you can contribute rather than the time that you spend. If you can convince your client that this new website will bring them in $50,000 of new revenue, now don't just make that number up, you need some data to back that up. But if you can convince them of that, and you're pretty confident that you can accomplish that, then they're going to be willing to pay maybe $25,000 for a website. And some of you guys out there are going to be like, no way. Nobody would ever pay me that much for a website. But here's the thing, say you're a business owner. In what world would you not spend $25,000 to make $50,000? I mean, heck, even if you're just a regular person. If somebody says you can make this amount of money by spending half of that amount of money, it's almost always going to be a good investment. Now, you obviously have to be careful and make sure you can actually produce those results. But notice throughout this entire thing that we never talked about how much time that website took to make. Because in the end, the client gets the same amount of value from it. They don't care if you spent a week doing the website, a month doing it, or if you designed it in a day. The results are the same. And when you realize that, you're going to be able to talk with clients and negotiate with them a lot easier because you understand the value that you're bringing them now. And I think too, it also helps you see yourself as more of a professional. You're not somebody that just makes pretty things on a screen. You're somebody that goes out and makes real, tangible impacts on businesses. And guys, that'll wrap up this Q&A. I hope you really enjoyed it. There's definitely some questions that I wanted to answer that I just couldn't get to today. So I'll definitely do those in another episode. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss it when that comes out. And if you have any other questions you'd like me to go over in future episodes, leave those in the comments. If you enjoyed this video and you think it's got some information that people you know would really enjoy, share it with them. Don't forget to give this video a like, because that really helps me out. If you want to see any of my other videos, you can watch some of those right here. Once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.